afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Afternoon. Welcome to today's session of Young and Dynamic. I am so excited to welcome you all, young dynamites from everywhere on this platform. So, as always, I'll start with the housekeeping rules, and then I'll leave the time to our governor Tiendo to pray for us. So please make sure that you have a notebook and a pen to take down your notes throughout the session, and make sure that you're on mute. If you're leaving the meeting, please please close your video, and when you're back, then you can turn on your video. Also, the chat platform is open to you to make your comments, to ask questions, and our leaders will be there to facilitate and help you. So I'll leave this moment to our governor, Tiendo, to pray for us and give us blessing for today. Over to you, Tiendo.
Afternoon, fellows. Today our reading is coming from the Book of Kings. We should know where to ask for help when we need help in our lives. So we pray that God will lead us in whatever we want to do, and that we were to ask for help when we're in times of trouble. Let's pray. Session yedu mwari wankyambiri mutatu kusamirira ojo bine kuzoto muri kufanana Jehovah. Be with the give him the word to give us, Jehovah. May please help him when he's delivering his message, and may please help us to participate in the lesson that we are going to be taught. In your mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen and amen. Thank you, Tiendo, for leading us in prayer.
You're welcome.
All right. So for today, we're going to welcome back our Professor Mandi Rukuni for Lift Up Africa series. I'll give a brief introduction of our professor, and then I'll hand over to him. Professor Mandi Rukuni is an accomplished development practitioner, organizational transformation strategist, analyst, coach, and mentor. A Zimbabwean national, Professor Rukuni is currently the director of BEAT Leadership and Doctoral Academy. With decades of experience, Prof. Mandi Rukuni, he has received several honors and awards and has published 15 books and more than 100 articles. He has devoted a significant amount of effort as a strategic advisor to the Africa Union programs, including Comprehensive African Agriculture Development, Land Policy Initiative, and Rural Futures Program. Professor Rukuni currently holds seminars and shares the message of what it means to be African. He has written a series of books, Being African, African Pathways, among others, which focus on exploring the age-old richness and the values of Ubuntu. Wow, 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 what a profile. So allow me to give this moment to our professor to continue with the series. Over to you, Professor Rukuni.
Absolutely. I wish I was Professor Rukuni with all that, with such a profile. I'm sure by the time I get to be his age, I will be like him. Thank you very much, Faith, for such a wonderful introduction. And I can see that some people are crushing on your hairstyle here. Right from dry run, people are saying, "Oh, nice hairstyle! Oh, nice hairstyle!" So nice hairstyle. Great. So before the professor comes in, I'd like us to have a conversation on what we have been discussing and what we have been talking about as Young and Dynamic, just to make sure that we are all lined up. We all know what exactly it is we are trying to achieve in having this conversation. So I will right now give this opportunity to you, Dynamites. Lift your hand up if you want to share what you have learned so far and what you think this whole Lift Up Africa series is all about. It's important that we remind each other. I mean, this is the 4th session of the Lift Up Africa series. So we need to constantly remind each other. What are we trying to achieve? Where are we going? I'm looking for some hands up. And as I'm also looking forward for you guys to encourage your fellow dynamites to connect, just send a message in your group or send a message to your friend and say, connect, it's YND, it's up. Right. Sharon all the way from GZU. What have you learned? What are you taking from this?
Thank you so much, Pastor Munashe. This prayer campaign has been very, very insightful, and I really appreciate that Her Life is doing everything possible for us to be able to be individuals who are rooted in the Word of God, who pray every day, because you cannot go anywhere without prayer. Prayer is very essential, and everything works together if one prays. So I really appreciate, and I'm I'm so short of words. It could be better prayer campaign, Pastor.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much. So Sharon went to where the root is, isn't it? So Lift Up Africa series, which we are hosting here on Young and Dynamic, was inspired by Lift Up Africa prayer campaign, the 90-day prayer campaign. So she went to the root of the issue to say it's been helpful in her life. Indeed, prayer is a position of privilege, is a position of power, it's a position of dominion. So I understand where she is coming from. And thank you for sharing with us. And we still encourage everyone to connect for prayer tonight at 8:30. So I'd like to know what this Lift Up Africa series has inspired you, or what you have learned from it. I will go with Palesa. I think I saw Palesa's hand up. There we go. So Palesa, if you can unmute and talk to us. What have you learned so far? I will ask you again. Okay, sorry. There we go. I'll ask you again to unmute.
Good afternoon, Pastor Munashi.
Good afternoon. It'll be good if we see your video. Are you able to switch on your video? So I know what's happening with Vanessa there, but I know she'll switch on the video. Yes, talk to me. What have you learned so far?
Pastor Munashi.
Yes.
Following up on the leadership series and the Lift Up Africa campaign, I learned that religion is very, very important as we are young leaders of Africa.
Absolutely, absolutely. Knowing your spiritual roots.
We need we need to be deeply rooted. We need to be deeply rooted in our Christian faith in order to stand firm as young leaders of Africa, because if we are not deeply rooted in our faith, we won't be grounded in our
Absolutely. I'm not sure whether it's my internet or it's Palesa's internet, but I get the gist of what she is saying. I think it's her internet. So she's talking about the first 2 sessions we had with Dr. Chichetu, where he was telling us the importance of having spiritual capital, or of understanding spiritual capital as a young leader. Very important and very crucial. And we were saying that as African leaders, we can't lead this continent without spiritual roots from which our values are derived from. things like integrity, things like determination, things like accountability, things like respect for others. Very important and very crucial. So if you want to be a grounded leader, you need to ensure that your spiritual background is solid. And he posed a question and a proposition, if I should put it that way. He said, my suggestion would be, we are all anchored in the Christian faith, because with where the world is, the only palatable platform, the only palatable religion or religion of choice that will enable to move this continent forward would be Christian and Christian values. Very important, and I hope that you guys haven't missed it. Now, the problem with young people is you love God when you are this young, when you don't have money. Huh? When you're this young and you're looking for opportunities, you're looking for a place. Once you get money, that ends. We don't see you anymore at church. You don't come for cell group anymore. You don't read the Bible anymore. You don't pray anymore. And that story has been done over and over again. We have seen it in our communities. Where someone who started with a little tuck shop, he was with him and his wife and 2 kids. And when his tuck shop became a supermarket, he decided to go and marry the 3rd wife, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th. And before you know it, his business was going. Why? Because he moved from the basic values from which he started from. So I'd like to encourage you that don't be like an African man, okay? Don't be like an African man from Mashingo, Komatikid. Once he gets money, that's my Kumusha. Once he gets money, he then throws away God, he throws away prayer. He now wants to marry another wife. These days, they are now marrying another man. Another man, just because you now have the money. Let your Christian faith direct the way that you do and the way you do things and the way you walk your life. Let me go to Nixon. I was trying to find out which Tanaka is that one, Tanaka Chires. So I'm not going to ask Tanaka to speak for now. I'll go for Nixon Munje from Midland State University. Nixon, kindly unmute. I've asked you to unmute and let's talk.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Mnashe.
Sure. Are you able to switch on your video? It would be good to see your face. Allow us to see your handsome face. Amazing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as for me, I've learned about the importance of religion in trying to lift up Africa, or in trying to have Africa as a developed nation. So, like the previous session, I've learned about the strategies which can be adopted by us as youth in as far as we want to develop our Africa as a continent. So I have learned that us as youth, we have to put more efforts in as far as we want to develop our Africa, be it in trade or in utilization of our land, in each and every aspect that we want to do. We have to put God first and remind each other that we are the ones who is responsible for the development of Africa. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. He's reiterating on the point of spiritual capital, right? And can someone define spiritual capital for me in the chat box? Dr. Chichetu talked about that, and it's important. Please just remind someone and define it in the chat box so that everyone is brought up to speed. And I like the point that he also brought up, the issue of taking ownership and responsibility of the development of our continent as a people. Thank you for that, Nixon. I'm still looking for more hands to come through, more hands. I will go with Joella. I've just asked you to unmute.
Thank you, Pastor Mnashi. I can switch on my video.
Please, if you can, do so.
I would like to, but I can't.
Okay.
All right. So my takeaways from these young YND sessions, one of my takeaway is knowing your self-identity. Like we should know our identity in God. We should know who we are in God. We should know that we are made in the image of God and we are wonderfully and fearfully made. That was said in one of our sessions that we had. And I also took up my takeaway. My another takeaway was, let us have integrity as Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And another takeaway is excellence, that only the best is good for Africa.
Mm-hmm.
We are excellent and we deserve excellence. Thank you, Pastor Mnashi.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Joella, for just reiterating on the values that Dr. Chichetu also shared with us there. I will go to Iga from all the way from Kabulawayo, NAST. Kindly unmute, and if you can switch on your video and let's have this conversation. What has been your takeaway on this Lift Up Africa series? Kindly switch on your video if you can.
Unfortunately, I can't, but
That's
I can
fine.
still speak. That's okay. All right. So thank you so much. My biggest takeaway from this was the fact that whenever we pray, whenever we make prayers, we pray for other things and forget that we're Africans and we have a continent that we have to care about, be responsible for, and pray for it. So you realize as the series was whatever the campaign was going on, I was just realizing more and more that, oh, you are African and you're responsible for its upkeep. And this is one of the ways in which you can be responsible. Prayer and just having the knowledge come to you, how rich it is, wildlife, and all. It was just enlightening, and I hope to learn more and care more about Africa after this campaign. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iga. I was, thank you very much for bringing another perspective to this. Because the other week we played the video where we were just showing a documentary where we were just showing the beauty of the African continent. So I hope the conversations from now on, we are going to talk about the video and then Professor Kuni's session. I think we have talked enough about the African mythology, the first two sessions we had. So I'd like to hear more about what we talked about last week and what we talked about the other week before that. I think on the spiritual capital side, we have exhausted. So I will move on to Innocent. Innocent, kindly unmute and let's have a conversation. If you can switch on your video, that would be good. What are your takeaways, or what has this inspired you to start doing?
Thank you so much, Pastor Mnashi, and good afternoon to the rest of the people who are listening right now. I'd like to pass my acknowledgements to those who have exhausted on the issues of our religious take when it comes to the Lift Africa thing is concerned. So from the session we had last weekend with Professor Rukuni, I learned that the youth, particularly us as the young and dynamic guys, we need to have a take when it comes to the issues of elevating our Africa, because we are the ones who hold energy and enthusiasm when it comes to the issues of developing our own Africa. I quote one of these statements saying, whoever controls Africa runs the world. Out of the meaning that Africa as a whole has got a lot of resources that we can use actually to elevate and develop our own Africa, meaning that Africa is the breadbasket of the world, in other words. So Professor Kun been talking of us youth taking part in all the sectors like agricultural sector, mining, construction, automotive, also trade and other things. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Innocent. Handsome with brains.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing all these conversations. There is a lot that you have brought forward in this conversation. The very fact that our youth dividend can be used as capital, right? Because what we bring on the platform is young people, as he has already said. We have time, we have energy. So before we go far, how are you using your time? How are you using your energy as a young person? Are you spending your time following all these lives that are happening on Facebook? Is that what you're doing? Are you following the dramas that are happening on Facebook? How better can you use your time and worse off your data? How can you use that? You know, this is where it is supposed to start from. When we say young people have time, this is what we are talking about. Right. On a Saturday morning, I know most of you don't go to school on a Saturday. How are you using that morning? All you are doing is, okay, I have to say it the way it is. You guys, I say it the way it is. You spend a whole Saturday morning or 2 hours or 3 hours of your evening following up on what is happening with Holy Ten and Kim. Really? Discussing how Holy Ten and Kim could have used the 15,000. Really? Following up, some of you went to a point of looking for Ruva's video. You were like, I want to see it. Please, someone said you actually had high blood pressure looking for Ruva's video. Yo. So this is what we are talking about. This is what we are talking about. How are you using your time and your energy? If we ask you who is Kim, you give us her biography from start to end. Here she was with Votes, from Votes she went to, and we ask you about, you even know Ruva's address. Let's start from there. How are you using your time? It matters. It matters how you use your time. Because as young people, you are part and parcel of the resources that we have. If Africa's median age is 18.1, if the majority of Africans are the youth, then Africa has to be developed by the youth. But if our youth are spending most of their time following up on the drama that Holy Ten is creating, on the drama that Ruva is creating, on the drama, on all these side shows that are happening, how do we see ourselves in 2030? Where will we be in 2030? So how are we using our time? It matters. Let me move over to Camilla with her contribution in case I start another session here. Camilla, kindly unmute and let's have a conversation. What have you learned so far? What have you taken away from the Lift Up Africa series?
Okay, thank you, Pastor Menashe. Good afternoon, Dynamite.
Good afternoon. Are you able to switch on your video?
Okay, I can try.
Please do.
Oh, it's on.
Great.
Well, this campaign, well, for me, basically, has been trying to highlight the resources we have in Africa, everything that we possess is Africa as a whole, that we are actually one nation instead of a continent. Like the previous session that we had, that actually highlighted that we've got uranium, we've got malls like Dubai, we've got white sand beaches, we've got everything. We have everything that we need instead of going outside. So actually, this Lift Up campaign has been trying to Africa together as one. It's been actually trying to unite as one, spiritually, economically, and resourcefully. I don't know if that's the term to use, but basically that's what I've taken up from this Lift Up campaign. Thank you, Pastor.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Camilla. One other thing we wanted you to know and to understand is Africa is yours for the taking. This is one thing that we wanted you to know. Do not limit yourself to Zimbabwe. The opportunities that you have, they transcend Zimbabwe. The opportunities that are at your disposal, they transcend Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Burundi, Kenya. They transcend all these nations. It is a whole continent. And if you are able to open up pathways, as Mrs. M says, to open up pathways for Africa to develop, and you start controlling some system of means of wealth in Africa, then you have become a global player. And that is what we are lacking from Africa. That is what we are lacking. If we are going to create a real wealth for this continent, we need to open pathways. We need to create systems that will generate wealth, that will generate money for Africa. And then we will not have to deal with SDG number 1. If you know what SDG number 1 is, please just type in the chat box. And SDG number 2 will not have to struggle with those issues. Then SDG number 3, putting up systems to assist in our health sector will become easier. So I need someone to just write down what SDG number 1 is and what SDG number 2 is in the chat box quickly, so that others also can learn from there. As I'm looking for the next person who is going to participate. Thank you, Rutendo. SDG number 1, we want to eradicate poverty. So let me go to Emmanuel Bradley. Emmanuel, what is it that you have taken so far from this series?
Okay, thank you so fast. Pastor Manasseh, from this series, I've managed to learn that is from the last session particularly, we've managed to learn that as youth, we are the center of everything. Youth are the center of everything. And the other thing that I like about the last 2 weeks, we had a good time is with the VSO, the Voluntary Service Overseas, where we were in a leading collaboration with IRLife and other stakeholders in trying to do what we call a workshop, a youth-led advocacy. We realized that as youth, we have been lagging behind, not trying to participate in certain things that matters the nation. Moreover, we are at least 65% of this population are youth, but that 65% is not being utilized by us. So we realized that is youth from the last session with the professor. We realized that is youth we are not taking up our chances. We are the ones who are more technological, but we use our mind and our resources on those things, on those pages following an MIT, wherever we follow those drama that are happening currently, but we don't use our resources to utilize them, but we are the future of tomorrow. So basically, those are some of the things that I managed to learn from the last series.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Emmanuel, and thank you for talking about the opportunity that you and Nondo and Governor Maya had to go and be trained on global standards of volunteerism. We'll certainly give you an opportunity to share with everyone. And thank you for being available. You know, those who are available are the ones who are going for training every now and again. We're having trainings as young and dynamic every now and again. But if you don't put yourself up forward, we will not be able to see you and will not be able to give you that opportunity. So we are looking forward for you guys to present yourselves and to give yourselves, show yourselves out so that you'll be able to be given opportunities. Thank you very much, guys, for coming through and for letting us know. I would have wanted Vice Governor Carlton to say something. It's good to see you, Vice Governor, but unfortunately, let's move on to today's session. I will hand over time to Professor Mandi Rukuni. Professor, good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you so much, Chair, and nice to be back.
Thank you so much. I'll hand over time to you, sir. And as soon as you are done, we have one of our own who is going to come through and engage with you in a question and answer. His name is William.
Thank you. So if I have the slides, please. I don't know. I think last time I had help with the slides. I don't know whether I'm having the same help this time. Yeah. So basically, my talk is really about the opportunities that the youth have on the continent. And I liked what I heard just as I was listening in, that these opportunities are well beyond individual borders. I mean, it's to look at Africa as one huge bulging market that is connecting. So if I have the next slide, please, I just would like to go through some kind of background issues around what really is the problem and the current economic position, and where, broadly speaking, where are the youth supposed to probably look at. Let me just look, maybe you have already shared some of these statistics, but if you go on to the next slide, the most important statistic to start with is that, if you look, next slide, please, is that of the 776 million persons of working age in Africa, an estimated 290 million of those are in a group called not employed, not in education, not in training. So ILO call that NEET, N-E-E-T, and that number by 2030 will have bulged to 375 million. So in this group, not employed, not in education, not in training altogether, 40% of this youth age of 20 to 24 years in East and Southern Africa is in this group. The rate for Zimbabwe is 29%, not because they have more formal employment, but simply because Zimbabwe just happens to have many more young people in the educational system, and that's why that number is low. The figures for NEET is worse for young women in the same age group, 68% in Ethiopia, can you imagine, all the way to 53% in Kenya. So it is a worrisome figure. Next slide, please. If we then go into why Africa has this dubious distinction of being the wealthiest, poorest continent. Amazing how wealthy the continent is. I mean, we have 40% of the world's gold, 90% of the world's chromium, 90% of the platinum. I mean, huge deposits of cobalt, diamonds, platinum, uranium, massive amounts of natural gas, name it, copper, iron, bauxite, silver. Altogether, Africa has the biggest percentage, at least 50 of all the world's known precious minerals. And we also have still the largest amount of arable land available for further agricultural production. So the long and the short, that even though some of the continents are chipping away at our market share, China is now growing cocoa, although by and large, Africa is still the largest grower of cocoa, sugar, salt, timber, tropical fruits. And I always say about our wildlife, there is no continent by far anywhere close to Africa in terms of charismatic wildlife. Our wildlife is the most charismatic in the world by a long stretch. The lion, there's no equivalent of it. Not even the tiger is as charismatic as the lion. The elephants, rhinos, giraffe, buffaloes, leopard. I mean, this is the cradle of humankind and also has the most charismatic wildlife. The potential of all this is huge. Africa has got most developed human spirit in the world. We are the only people who have never really get to go out and try and harass other people in other continents. Not because we can't, but it was never part of the spirit. Because this is the cradle of humankind. Next slide, please. So when it comes to the future, I have this big worry that we Africans are walking into economic greatness and we're not even aware of it, because even as we are not performing that well, our economies still have the potential of the fastest growth in the world. So the statistics I'm giving you here are showing that almost inevitable, Africa will be the largest economy by the second half of this century. Because I've given you the statistics here, starting just slicing up the century today, although the data says 2019, just call that today, then by the middle of the century, 2050, and then by the end of the century, 2100s. At the bottom, I've given you two scenarios. One where Africa is growing at 3%, which is on average where we are now, a little lower actually. But you will see that even at the lowest growth rates, Africa will be inching up better than you would originally have thought. But if we were to grow at 6%, which actually is easy for two reasons. Number one, Africa has grown at 4 or 5% before without much manufacturing, just through export of raw materials alone. Can you imagine Africa only manufactures 1.5% of the global manufacturing output, 1.5, which is miserable. If we were to just double that up to 3%, which is quite easy to do, to be quite honest, even at 3% of the global manufacturing, we will already be growing at 6, 7, 8%. I can tell you that. And if Africa were to grow at 6%, which by the way is less than half the rate at which China grew for more than 20, 30 years. So even at mediocre rates of 6%, Africa will be the largest economy in the world by 2060 latest. Next slide, please. So you understand my worry that we sleepwalk into economic greatness. We're not even aware of it. And I'm telling you, I'll repeat, young people, you have to transform Africa's economy from primary production to manufacturing. All you need to do is to manufacture 3 to 5% of the world's output, and they're already a superpower by the middle of the century. The population projections already show that by the middle of the century, 1 in every 5 human beings will be African. By the end of this century, 2 in 5 human beings will be African. What that means is, whether we like it or not, again, the global culture, the way the world is going to run in future is going to be largely determined by Africans. Next slide, please. So, next slide, please, because I think I've covered this point sufficiently. So, that explains to you and me why there have been 2 major scrambles for Africa over the last 400 or 500 years. It's so obvious. This is where resources are abundant, and as long as who controls Africa will control the world, because they can extract these raw materials for very little and continue to build their own manufacturing sectors. But colonization was the first scramble for Africa, and what it did for Africa was simply, I'm not even whinging about it, I'm just explaining to you that today the consequence is just easy to, through all sorts of measures, from trade to individual relations between former colonial masters and independent African governments, to manipulate Africa so that it doesn't manufacture, continues to supply raw material. This second, well, let me be more crude. First World War and Second World War, people say it was the Germans fighting its fellow European partners. It was the Germans fighting its fellow European partners so that they can figure out who is going to control Africa. So it was still about Africa. But this third phase is more benign because it makes it look like it's a fair game. It's all about trade. So it's not. Africa still does not manufacture. Africa continues to be a source of cheap raw materials. And Africa continues to import finished products, from toothpicks to dog biscuits. I mean, what kind of an African century is this, that we walk into the next economic superpower and we still import toothpicks? So the third scramble is the one Africa can win easily and will win easily. And we, the older generation, have done the best we can. We have failed the younger generation. If the younger generation is to follow just 20% of what I'm going to say from now on, Africa will be the next economic superpower after China, after the United States. That's why I'm concerned that we should not be the next economic superpower by walking into it. We have to consciously know that's what we are going to do, and we're going to do it. Next slide, please. So, what does this mean for Africa moving forward? Actually, in summary, we need a 50 to 100-year plan for every country in the world, not just for China and the United States. Oh, China has a 50 to 100-year plan for every country on the African continent. So does the United States. We don't even have one plan for China, and no single African country has a plan for China or United States. So first stage, as a one Africa, we don't have to have the same political boundaries across the 55 countries. We just need the same economic policy and the same foreign policy. And off we go. We can ensure that we develop a 50-year plan for every country in the world, and we will accelerate how we trade with them, how we exchange technologies with them, how we fund our programs, and ensure that they can lap and love African culture, because believe it or not, they love our culture. They love our sense of everything from fashion to cuisine but we haven't translated it to commercial output. And the young people, that's what you have to do. Next slide, please. So the current situation is that 55 African countries, each one of the 55 is in a middle income trap, meaning we have unorthodox structural transformation. Why? Because there is massive accelerating urbanization, but without manufacturing jobs. When you have masses of people migrating from rural to urban, but there are no manufacturing jobs in the city, it's just services. People are just going there for services because there's a better mobile, networks for your phone. There is more medicine in the clinics and so on. But to get out of the middle income trap requires us, first and foremost, to deal with the primary production connected straight to manufacturing. Next slide, please. And I'll go into that and show where the young people come in. We need to ensure that there are massive policy changes across the countries. And when we talk about policy change, I know young people, you say, we're excluded, we're not involved. Well, I am proposing, and I'll go into it in more detail, that young people, you should have the boldness to go straight into public service. Why should you try to influence the world from the sidelines? All you think about is making money from businesses. Well, it's not going to happen until you go into the public service, until you influence policy directly, until you drive public service systems that understand business, private service systems that understand how to build industries. If you don't do it, young people, expect people who have never done it to do it for you in public service as you hang around trying to go into innovation hubs. Tough luck. You have to change your mind very quickly. Next slide, please. What's this one saying? Okay, opportunities for growth. Actually, I want to go, next slide. I want to go into the table that shows us where all the major opportunities are. But before we go into that, I want to explain to you what industrialization is. Most people think industrialization just means building factories and producing finished products. No, industrialization is actually a major transformation of society at large. It's a mindset change, making it possible for everyone. It doesn't matter they're in the rural village or they're in the township or they're in a small town. The mindset is to change. So that is about mass production of raw material and being able to organizedly, in an organized fashion, aggregate products. I mean, don't grow anything which you don't know where it's going to end up in terms of manufacturing. Don't just produce stuff to sell at Mbaro Msika. It must be targeted for manufacturing, starting with manufacturing right in the village and the township and the small towns. That's why we need to build, young people have to have capacity for aggregating products and providing the agro-logistics to make sure it's in the right quality and time for manufacturing. So mass production leads to mass processing, and mass processing starts in the village and townships. That's how the Chinese did it. That's how the South Koreans did it. That's how the Vietnamese are doing it now. Don't think about manufacturing only happens in the big towns. It starts in the village and the township and the small towns. So when we say mass production, in mass processing, I'm talking about converting all the small towns and growth points into manufacturing centers, not administrative centers. In the case of Zimbabwe, Marondera, Chinoi, Masvingo, these, for young people, must not continue to be administrative centers. They must be converted into serious manufacturing centers. Mass consumption means consuming your own finished products. Don't produce things for export to start with. We must produce and mass process so that we can mass consume within a short distance. All these three processes must happen within 25 to 50 kilometers. Don't produce maize or soybeans and then send it all the way to Harare for processing 200 kilometers and send the maize back another 200 kilometers for consumption. No, that's not industrialization. When you eat food that has traveled 600 kilometers, for what? You must process the food right there in the township, in the growth point. Finished. All these snack foods are nice, people will want them, but listen, don't produce that stuff in the big city. In the big city should be serious industries only. The small time textile products, leatherware, packaging, herbs, and producing a lot of the snack foods should happen in villages and townships. Next slide. Or am I, okay, something happened. Can you hear me? The Tigers did it because they are the only ones, only because this up.
Kindly go ahead, Prof.
So I want you to understand, as young leaders in business and society, building industry requires top thinkers, both in government and private sector. So it's not about you having a successful business. It's about you having a successful business then within your own sector, working with others in your own sector to build a bigger industry in your sector, bigger market share, so that you're industrializing your sector. You are building market share domestically. By the time you export, you are somewhere else. So that's why the so-called informal sector is always the starting point, because that's what we have. Now, we in Africa call it informal sector. In Asia, they call it proto-industry. So that is part of official industrialization strategy, because all industrialization starts artisanal. But in Africa, we've been taught, no, you chuck that away, it's informal, it doesn't need the policies, people who are working outside the system. Proto-industry means you are manufacturing without a factory. And I can tell you that from 1980 to 1990, China was poorer than us, but they moved faster than you can ever think by accelerating mass production and going into proto-industries. You know that 10 years later, here in Africa, we're eating, for example, those noodles from China. And we thought, oh, no, those noodles initially were just produced for local consumption in China. And when they were fed up with their own, they started exporting to us. You see, produced in villages and townships. Noodles are not produced in Beijing. They don't, like we produce Maputi in Harare. It should be criminal to produce Maputi in Harare, in snack foods. You should do that in the township and consume them as closely as possible. It's only when the proto industries start upgrading from artisanal to small machines we need to see proliferation of these small machines in the countryside, because that's how you increase labor productivity. Small machines for everything, from preparation of foods, textile, to basic garment making, I mean, leatherware, and so on and so forth. Because it's those small machines which not only increase labor productivity, especially for young people, and women, but also increase income quicker. And then that's only when you start seeing serious light industry in the small towns. So when I say industrialize the small towns, it is still to start in the village and township by pushing the proto industries. By the time you get into the smaller towns, you have light industry. Light industries are what produces the demand for heavy industry. Heavy industry is where you go into the steel mills, the foundries, the major energy, water, etc., because there is a lot of light industry. You don't build a steel mill to supply as insignificant light industry. So young leaders build the whole industry, work together to build the proto industries and see them grow into light industries, because that's how you're going to get those machines, reverse engineer the machines until you stop importing the Chinese Changfa machines and so on, because now there are so many of them, you can now prefabricate those machines here. And that's how everyone else before us has done it. There's no other way for us for now. We just have to get all those technologies in there and reverse engineer them, and the young people can do it. Don't expect anyone to do that for you. Next slide, please. So I would like to dwell a little bit on this chart because the opportunities are everywhere. I've given you this whole cross-section of sectors because young people should not restrict yourselves to what you think is sexy. Everything is actually sexy. As soon as it makes money, guess what? It becomes sexy for young people. So I know that when we speak generally, we see on the left here, we say primary industries. That's where we have our extraction, mining, and agriculture, and so on, leading into the secondary industries, which is your manufacturing and then your services. And then as your society transforms further, the quaternary sector, the knowledge sector, which you should not neglect the knowledge sector, young people, because it's not only about innovation, it's about understanding the primary sciences, it's about understanding deeper all the primary knowledge so that we can overtake the current leaders. Otherwise, we will only play catch up and never be able to exceed them. And the quinary ones is where they kill us. Is culture and research, because at the end of the day, everything you sell is culture. You're selling culture. When you go to a fast food restaurant, McDonald's or KFC, you're not buying food. You are buying culture, actually, because the food you're buying is junk. I mean, your mother and grandmother can cook healthier and tastier food, but you go and pay more there for that one because you're buying culture, because it's about being seen to be there. We're also there. So everything, fashion, architecture, it's ultimately selling our culture by modernizing it and not westernizing it. Young people, Western people and Eastern people are tired of coming to Africa and we sell them the same thing they are running away from. The British, the Americans, the Germans are tired of Western clothes and Western food. They come here, we put them in our hotels, they look like they're back in New York and they watch Western movies and Western news. No, young people, sell them modern African products, all the way from the hospitality, the architecture, the fashion, the cuisine, the storytelling, tell our stories. That's what people buy. So across all the key sectors, I've given you anything up to 23 sectors. All those present opportunities for you, from the primary ones, which I said agriculture, fish, forestry, hunting, and mining, quarrying, all that. But when you go further down, you then see the manufacturing sectors are huge. And don't be too choosy, because all of them, once you are a manufacturing generation, it doesn't matter you're manufacturing food, you're packing meats, you're in electronics or chemicals, it's all gonna be special. And by the time you get into the heavier industries, the energy sector, you're dealing with gas, power engineering. You're already beginning to prefabricate automotives. You are on your way, young people, to be the next economic superpower. Africans have always been the most creative people. By the time we take over the information and software industries, the semiconductor industry, all this, we are amazingly creative. We're going to create new products. You see, new products and new ideas all exist in the field of the unknown. You see, new ideas are not just coming from copying and pasting, you know, but we are afraid of the unknown. And yet that is our biggest friend. The unknown is the energy field of infinite possibilities. That's where we're going to come up with the best. Even in the financial services sector and insurance, we're going to come up with the best products. I mean, M-Pesa was just the start. It cannot be the end. And we've got Eco Cash today. And so we need to continue going. And when it comes to real estate and home industries and all that, I'm telling you, the African architecture and the homeliness, people are coming for freshness. I mean, if fresh air could be sold, they will be coming to Africa to buy it. But they should want to stay here for longer. So name it, all the way to, because healthcare is a huge issue. I'm saying healthcare because the whole Western world has made huge advances in medicine, but it's all curative medicines. It's all inorganic chemicals being pumped into people. Africa can lead the way, is already leading the way into preventative medicine. Young people, you must learn all your botanics and your organics. This in future is going to be unlimited wealth. People are tired of consuming chemicals. People would want to eat healthy. The educational system is haywire in Africa. We are producing young people whom are not yet prepared for the real world. It has to change, but it has to go beyond that, to showing the world how to live, to recreate the family system, recreate the community system. Almost every aspect of life has to be recreated. And you young people are the ones to do it. Anyway, I've oversaid it maybe, but I'm saying the whole shebang, all the sectors, go in there, not only in your country, across. You've got Africa, Continental Free Trade Agreements and other regional ones. You can move stuff. They are trying to get as much buy-in into these. They are waiting for you to start exporting across the borders. They're waiting for you even to start crossing the borders yourselves to exchange humankind, because we are one continent. So we don't only share trade. The boundaries should not be the issue. We should share everything, HR, in other words, personnel and so on. So next slide, please, so that I can end, probably say too much. I want to introduce the Africa Union new program that I've been helping to finalize. This Energize Africa is Africa Union program for young people, harnessing the potential of Africa's youth to transform the continent. Next slide, please. Say a bit more. You can see there, they are starting off by identifying there's at least almost 700 innovation hubs on the continent. And there's all manner of attempts to support people in these innovation ecosystems, co-working spaces, incubators, accelerators, name it, it's all here. But guess what? And go on to the next slide, please. There are so many limitations. The challenges are huge: insufficient investment capital, weak infrastructure, scarce skills, the internet speeds are not that great. The regulatory framework often stops young people being creative. The policy environment is to be made right. So many barriers, legal, even the Bureau of Standards issues. In other words, if you young people don't get into this public service, if you young people don't ensure that you are operating across the entire value chain system and you're influencing it from policy to legislation, regulations, these innovation ecosystems won't deliver for you. So as much as you want to spend time in the innovation hubs, spend as much time also working your way into the spaces that we older generation have monopolized, and you are not there, and somehow you think it's going to change when you are not there. As people are Apple. If you don't come, thank you very much. We'll continue messing it up for you, and then I'm happy to blame you. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just go, I think I've said enough. Whoever controls Africa runs the world. So if Africa wants to be the next superpower, we must control the resources. We must do more manufacturing for ourselves. Next, hopefully the last slide. Yeah, it looks like it. Yes, thank you very much, and for your patience listening to an old man speak for so long. I'm happy to engage in a conversation. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, Professor. All right, so we're getting into a segment where we will ask the professor some questions, and he will clear up any questions that we have. So I'm going to hand over to William so that he can facilitate this segment. Afternoon, William, how are you? Do we have William on the call?
Hello, good afternoon. How are you? Thank you. Can you hear me?
I'm fine. Yes, loud and clear. But we can't see you yet.
Can't you see me? I think I'm on video. Can you see me now?
All right, I think, can we spotlight him? You can take over.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Mandwamba Rukuni, for the insightful presentation. I'm very honored to be part of this discussion. My name is William Madudike, and I'm part of the Star Leadership Academy alumni, and I'll be leading you through this question and answer session. So I'll be happy to pick some of the questions from the chat box. Because of time, I will not be able to pick some of the questions to spotlight some of you so that you can ask your questions on the video. So please put your questions in the chat box and I'll pick, and Professor Mandiru Kuni will be answering as they come. I hope we all got that. So I have only 10 to 15 minutes for this section. So my question, as we receive questions from the young people in the chat box, my question, Professor, would be, Africa is bigger when we are truly one, not in the current state as 54 individual countries. What do we need to do to transcend the physical, cultural, and economic boundaries and have one voice and leverage on the numbers we have spoken about and leverage on the aggregate economy? What have we to do to be able to become a powerhouse and become one Africa? Thank you. I hope you got my question.
Yes, William, excellent question. You know, the detractors of African unity always cite huge statistics. There are more than 1,000 languages on the continent. There are so many cultural differences. I tell you what, I've been in more than 25 African countries, maybe 30 over the last 40 years. In spite of all the differences that we have, guess what? The similarities are more powerful. It's we so-called educated Africans who are enemies of African unity, believe it or not. Because the ones that haven't too much formal education, they have no respect for these borders. You know, people will walk from Tanzania, Ethiopia, find their way to South Africa or any part of the continent and cross 3, 4, 5, 6 borders, speaking, people in those areas speak different languages. But guess what? most of the rural Africans are still true Africans. They see somebody who looks like them, but speaks a different language. Oh, they are so happy to say, they love it. So these people don't feel threatened. They can cross borders without documents. They can move products without documents. They believe in African unity more than we do. But at the formal level, the way forward, in my opinion, is to learn intelligently from how other regions have done it and how we can fast track ours. So there's two main reasons why regional integration will work or not work. Number one, political will. Number two, capacity to then integrate. And guess what? Political will, mostly we were given at independence between 1956 when Ghana became independent and when the Organization of African Unity was created in 1963. We were told by our former colonial masters, you are better off as independent nations with individual relationship with your former colonial master than uniting. Okay, fine, I'm not gonna worry about it, but guess what? Today, as we speak, all Africa doesn't need even to start with one common border. It can start with the existing political borders, but agree on 2 or 3 things. One, the same foreign policy. Before you go to United Nations, G20 and all this stuff, agree on a common position as Africa. This is our foreign policy. For instance, tell the rest of the world, you harass and you segregate Africans where they are. If you continue doing that, injury to one African is injury to all Africans. We won't allow you to come to Africa and trade. End of the story. You'll see what happens the following day, the amount of respect that they will have, because African Americans are harassed in the United States, not because of anything except that we are weak here in Africa. If we were strong here in Africa, no one will touch them. But capacity now is a function of enforcing agreements and treaties that we sign. And I'm happy to say, although the African Union hasn't quite been there, but there is enough legislation now, if it was to be enforced, to ensure that once a treaty is agreed or a declaration is made, it can be legally enforced, actually. So we are close.
Thank you, Professor, for that answer. Injury to one, as you say, is injury to all, and I hope that we can all be that united. I have a question from Nicole Piri from SLA class of 2023. The question is, how is it wise to have 50-year plan for a continent or a country when our short-term plan as governments have not been truly successful? And that's the question.
If you don't have you see, because a basic lesson in strategy, right? There's no single idea or a problem which is solved at one level, okay? There's at least 5 levels at which any serious plan is conceptualized. And what may appear to be a solution in the short term could actually be a negative thing in the medium term. So just planning short term does not mean you've got a strategic plan. You've got a survival plan. You're just dealing with events and a few trends that are happening. If you have a 50-year plan, you have analyzed it so deeply that you can run scenarios. You can anticipate, even if things don't happen initially planned, you are much more prepared to deal with the changing world. And so don't think that the Japanese and the Chinese are stupid having 50-year plans. Look at what has taken them. In less than 40 years, China from a country poorer than Africa to the 2nd superpower. Within the next 10 years, the #1 superpower. It doesn't come from short-term planning.
Thank you on that. I'll go straight into the 3rd question by Tiana Tanaka, again from SLA class of 2023. And the question is, Professor, you say that for us to rise up, we must control our resources. What is your take on teaching that once I received that it's not about your resources, but how you use them? And also, how can we as young people efficiently use our resources? I hope you got the question.
Yes, so what I was trying to get at is to say, as young people, don't go into primary production thinking, well, I'll produce this gold, I'll produce this maize, I'll produce this soybean, I'll produce this cocoa, and then I'll figure out where to sell it. And oh, hopefully I get a foreign buyer so that I can be paid in foreign currency. What I'm saying is, you need people amongst yourselves and government who say, how do we build the entire industry for soybean, for cocoa, it doesn't matter what it is. If you don't have the line of sight, we primary production into immediate aggregation and processing locally, into immediate consumption of our goods and services locally, you will still be a weak society, because China and the United States are global superpowers, not because they export to everybody. It's because they have the largest domestic markets in the world. They can consume all their manufactured products. And export is the luxury that makes them superpowers. But if you have a weak domestic manufacturing, weak demand for your own manufactured goods, you are just exporting, then you're going to be like Brazil and South Africa, be able to manufacture aeroplane, but you are still a poor country. You are still in a highly unemployed people. The social unrest is still massive. It's a middle income trap. You don't get out of it. I think I can't, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Professor, for that response. There is a question from Buse, one of the students from Bindura University of Science Education. It is pertaining to the innovation hubs and innovation ecosystems. It says, what are the possible solutions that may be put forward to deal with the challenges associated with innovation ecosystems? I think you mentioned the challenges with these innovation hubs that we have started yet. So what are the possible solutions to overcome those challenges?
So the main reason why the innovation hubs and the innovation ecosystem as a whole is struggling mainly because we are not manufacturing ourselves. So you can have brilliant ideas, and I've seen incredible ideas from young people. No market, no investors. You know, there's so many hindrances because there is no serious industrial strategy which picks people up from an idea all the way to a startup and all the way through to a successful business. It is easier when you have an industrializing society, not one which itself is a service industry and importing trinkets and products from elsewhere, because it's so easy for those industries to even kill startups. They can flood the market, the borders are porous, you're importing almost everything, but as you import it, you're not even going through the proper customs system. So the products looks cheaper or more competitive than it really is. So we need governments who are serious about, if we restrict importation of this product, it means we have to be sure we're supporting this industry from primary production to manufacturing to distribution, all the way to consumption. But no, you can have legislation trying to protect a local industry, but no measures in place to ensure that when young people have these innovations and startups, they can actually take their product all the way through to a growing domestic market. That's what the problem is. And I'm chairman myself of Great Zimbabwe University, and I've seen painful, brilliant ideas, brilliant products. We graduate our students and they've been through the innovation process. They see a little bit of industrialization, but guess what? When they graduate and go out there, they're still facing the real world. They still have to take another 2 to 3 years to find out that they still are not ready for the real world. Because you may have been trained in engineering, but by the 3rd year of not finding a job in engineering, you find yourself now in horticulture, because that's where the opportunity is. So our education system still needs to actually prepare young people much more flexibly, make them greater thinker-doer, so that they can flexibly use their education to move from one sector to another, not to be stuck in one sector which you were trained and yet you're not even prepared for it. There are not even jobs there.
Thank you, Professor Rukuni, for that response. I concur with you on how we need to transition. And following up on the question on transition, there's Luke Mungwe from NAST. The question was, how do we transition from just having SMEs that are focused on small scale production to full on mass manufacturing and production, considering the capital base and the fact that most of the current SMEs are due to individuals are just looking for their next meal, not necessarily economic development of the continent. This is something I attest to. We probably have as many entrepreneurs who are entrepreneurs, not because they see a need that they need to satisfy, but because it's the jobs that they can actually do. So how do we transition from that mentality and from that state into a full-on mass manufacturing and go through the phases you have stated in your presentation?
Yeah, in my opinion, the way to do it is, to start with, don't confuse economies of scale with economies of size. You see, economies of scale happen when many thousands of small enterprises are organized in such a way that they add up to a big industry. That's economies of scale. The problem is when you have small businesses growing, but they are not organized or connected into one big industry, then you got a problem. So small businesses is not a problem. It's being able to connect them, and once, okay, they may be competing at one level, but at another level, they're working together as one industry, which is growing, with the growing market share. So at the end of it all, Africa is better off with big industries, but created through thousands upon thousands of small businesses that aggregate into big. Then when we become serious upper middle income countries, majority of our population is now in the middle classes, then the really big companies come through. All these countries with huge companies, United States, China, Russia, did not start with the big businesses, then small ones came. You start building an industry, bottom up. Economies of size only come in when you are a fully industrialized country. Then economies of size kick in, bigger farms become more efficient than smaller ones. But when the majority of your people are rural or unemployed, doesn't work. Economies of size don't kick in, don't help you. Economies of scale are what you need. Thousands upon thousands of small farmers, thousands upon thousands of small businesses organized into one business that aggregates and operates with the full policy environment, which makes it possible to get support from your government. Good policy environment, good support from the financial services sectors, business that understand and able to finance this thing, because finance is the blood. It's like your body, your blood circulates. That's what money is. That's what it says, to circulate. So all businesses which are not organized in a way that you are straight through to manufacturing and distribution, you are outside the blood distribution system. You are going to die because you're only supplying Barim Sika, Sakuva. You cannot create a big business, industry that way. Thank you.
That's very true, Professor Rukuni, and thank you for that. My very last question is just an integration of some of the questions that have been mentioned that are addressing essentially one thing. Let's talk about ACFTA, Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I think it was launched about 5 years ago, and African Union has declared this year the year of the ACFTA. how do we expedite and catalyze the integration of African markets? Because that is what we are essentially discussing here, Professor. The domestic markets. If we are to produce for ourselves, like you say, and you always say, learn to produce what you consume and consume what you produce. How do we expedite this essential arm of our African Union, ACFTA, in order for us to harness the market, the billion number market that we have?
So, in my opinion, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is a massive progress forward. For it to bring the benefits and the accelerated economic development that we look for, it can only succeed if certain other things are happening at the same time. First and foremost, we are still not a manufacturing continent. So just massive increase in trade and you are trying to trade primary products doesn't work because it's very expensive to transport maize from Zimbabwe to Kenya for, the primary products are not what should drive trade in Africa. The first thing that needs to happen is to use the energy of young people to move up and down the borders, in and out, to connect the energies for manufacturing, so that as they are figuring out how to create big industries out of the interconnectedness, you start manufacturing more, and guess what? Then you're going to see the banking sector following behind and growing with you. And as Africa starts manufacturing more, instead of 1.5%, we're now at 5%. So the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement has to be activated by starting with a target. In the next 10 years, 5% manufacturing, we must hit that target. How do we achieve that? Once we have answered that, then we can say, yes, then we accelerate the inter-regional trade. Not just that by accelerating trade when you are producing primary products. Who wants to be importing maize, soybeans? People, Zimbabwe, remember we used to cry about, regional bread basket. Who wants to be regional bread basket anymore? That's 50 years ago, man. People don't want to import maize. Even Malawi produces enough of its maize. Zambia is producing enough of its maize. Forget it. We must be manufacturing stuff and exporting manufactured finished products. Then we exchanged finished products. Then Africa will start rising. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Mandiwa Barkuni. It was a pleasure for me, and I'm hoping for the young people to be engaging with a great mind like yours. I'm sure also that you, in interacting with us, you also have the opportunity to have a peep into the future, because we are going to carry your word and your message into the future. 20 years to come, we'll probably be singing the same message and reaping the results. I'll hand over to Faith to conclude on this. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. Good day.
Good day. Thank you so much, William. Thank you for facilitating so well. I agree with you. I will definitely carry all this knowledge 20 years or 30 years later into our lives. Thank you so much, Professor, for facilitating this session. It has been very insightful. So I'll close this session with closing remarks. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share Young and Dynamic posts on social media on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Also subscribe and follow Young and Dynamic channels and pages. The Global Intercessors Group is open 24/7. So remember to join and pray for yourself, pray for your families, and pray for Africa at large. Thank you so much to everyone for connecting today. Catch you next week, same time and same place. Goodbye.